The 1980s was a great decade to be a kid. Many of the toys have become iconic, and some of them have remained popular ever since they were released. However, there were some toys that were just plain weird. In this video, we'll take a closer look at some of the strangest toys of the 1980s. Manglors were first released in 1984 by the Ideal Toy Company. The original line consisted of Manglord, Manglosaurus, and Manglodactyl. These action figures were a little strange, but they got even more weird in 1985 when the second wave of figures were released in plastic eggs. Some of the new characters were Manglodragon, Manglizard, and Manglodemon. The figures had no joints, but they were flexible, sticky, and squishy. They were really disappointed because they weren't painted and they couldn't stand on their own. If that doesn't sound bad enough, then get a load of this. The commercials of the time led children to believe that they could rip their toys apart and then put them back together again. This was impossible, and kids were left with mangled Manglors and tears. In 1984, Galoob came out with a toy line called Infestables, Mystery Warriors of Change. Each character's face gradually changed from human to animalistic with the use of a vacuum. Definitely sounds like some sucky toys. Some of the good guys were named Sphinx, Robash, Iron Lion, and War Dog. The bad guys were Tuscus, Torto the Claw, and Timbo. At least they were creative. Barnyard Commandos was a series of figures that was released in 1989 by the Playmates Company. The toy line had an interesting concept with the story behind the toys. Basically, they were farm animals that ate some radioactive materials and they developed superpowers. They then donned military equipment and went to war with each other. The two sides feuding were the Rams, or Rebel Army of Military Sheep, and the Porks, or Platoon of Rebel Killer Swine. Like many toys of the 80s, there was also an animated series. However, neither the non-posable action figures or the cartoon ever became successful. In 1988, Mattel released a line of action figures known as Food Fighters, and there were two sides at war with each other. The Kitchen Commandos were the good guys, and they fought against the Refrigerator Rejects, who were the bad guys. They were all good old-fashioned American junk food with attitude. Some of the character names were Major Munch, Brigadier General, Private Pizza, Short Stack, and Fat French. Apparently, these food fighters had a short shelf life and they didn't last long on the market. Breath Blasters was released by Axelon, and they were little rubber toys about 5 inches tall that not only looked bad, but also smelled bad. If you squeezed them, then they would release a puff of air that smelt like garbage, vomit, or dead fish. The character names pretty well said it all. George Garbage Mouth, Mackerel Mouth, Miss Morning Breath, Victor Vomit, Dog Breath, and Death Breath. With all those varieties, you're sure to find that perfect scent to impress that special person. The company soon fell under a stink of its own. They claimed the fumes that the toys were emitting were non-toxic, but they were indeed toxic. This led to the dangerous toys being banned and all production was ceased. Rude Ralph was released in 1986 by Axelon, which were the same makers of the Breath Blasters. The company was certainly trying to ride the trend of gross toys and products that peaked in the mid-1980s. Ralph was a large-sized head that seemed to be modeled after Madball's. However, he was a bit different. If you pulled his eyeball, he would play one of 4 unique and gross sounds, which could be farting and gagging. E.T. was a Steven Spielberg movie that was released in 1982, and it tells the story of an alien that is stranded on Earth. A young boy befriends the alien and helps to return him to his home planet. One of the most iconic scenes of the entire movie came when E.T.'s finger lit up. The good folks at the company Knickerbocker had hopes of capitalizing on that iconic scene by releasing one of the worst toys ever made. The E.T. figure was released in 1982 and it just looks awful. I'm sure you have your own thoughts on what it looks like, and you're absolutely right, it does look like that. Why else would this toy have a human flesh color to it when E.T. himself was a completely different color? Did the designer even watch this movie, or was he watching something out of a fetish store? This strange toy eventually was recalled because parents everywhere realized what this resembled. The company then switched to a whole hand version with E.T. colors to avoid confusion. Ring Raiders was a toy line that came out from Matchbox in 1989. These small plastic toy planes were oddly mounted on plastic rings, which allowed the aircraft to have a small degree of mobility. Relatively few molds were produced for the toy line, and most aircraft were just repainted 3 or 4 times each. There were a dozen packs released, which consisted of 6 from the Ring Raiders and 6 from the Skull Squadron. An animated series was released at the same time, but it had a premise that was quite different. It was set in the future, which was 1998 at the time, as the world was about to embark on a cataclysmic war. The characters would use time travel to attempt to seize power. The show used the catchphrase, "The command is in my hand," and at that point the characters would use their rings to make them more powerful. Apparently those were mood rings because the series and the toy line only lasted for about 6 months. Zany Zappers became popular in the early 80s and they were released by Lakeside. They were really nothing more than a pair of sunglasses with an LED in each lens. The lights were powered by a 9-volt battery on a wire that was attached to the sunglasses, and you could hide it in your pocket. Not only could you shock your grandparents with the sight of these when they lit up, but you could also engage in light fights with your friends. I'm not sure how you determine who the winner is, though. Apparently, these were the things to have if you wanted to show off your latest flashy dance moves. In 1986, Mattel came out with a new toy line that was aimed at little girls. They were Barbie-like, only their bodies were covered with back metal. Everything was back metal except for their heads, which had a different makeup and hair color on each doll. The line consisted of 4 female dolls and 1 male doll, and they were all aliens from the planet Shimmeron. I think it's safe to say that Mattel was spaced out on these. The Black Star toy line debuted in the US in 1983 from Gloob, and it was based on the 13-episode animated series from 1981. Gloob was hoping to capitalize on the success that He-Man was having. These fantasy toys were sort of a similar concept with action figures, dragons, and an ice castle. However, there was also a spaceship with rocket launchers. These toys never had the success that they had hoped for. Mattel came out with an interesting toy line in 1989 called Computer Warriors. The plot behind the toys explained a secret government computer that sends out evil troops. These troops hide unnoticed in everyday objects to take over the world. The Computer Warriors were made by the government to fight these bad troops. The premise of this toy line sounds great, but there never was an animated series to help it out. They created a pilot episode, but it ended there. Ultimately, the toy line failed to achieve success in the market. Like we discussed earlier, the mid-80s was all about gross toys and products. The Garbage Pail Kids cards and Mad Balls had set the standard. In 1986, Playtime Products released Skateboard Smackups. These controversial figures were kids that had gotten into all sorts of mishaps while skateboarding. There were 12 figures that were released with names like Sammy Stop Sign, Wally Wallbanger, Patty Plate Glass, Amy Asphalt, and Timmy Tire Track. The series outraged parents of the time, and many groups banned the toys. These figures skated off to obscurity shortly after. If you were around in the 80s, then I'm sure you'll remember all the craze with GoBots and Transformers. But how about converters? These were a line of toys that could transform from a robot into birds, bats, and insects. The converters licensed some of their toy designs from Bandai, which is what Transformers did. These converters were featured in a 1985 JCPenney's Christmas catalog. It's safe to say that these didn't convert into great sales. Speaking of robots and converting, how about another one from Bandai called the God Jesus Robot? This was released in 1984 and it was sort of a fortune-telling toy similar to the Magic 8 Ball. The difference between the two is that the God Jesus Robot had definite answers of yes or no. There were no maybes. If you touched the robot, it would move a few steps forward, nod its head, and await your question. The robot would then answer your question with a simple nod of its head and step back into its original position. The God Jesus Robot certainly didn't look holy when its eyes lit up in red. The 1980s certainly saw its share of strange and weird toys. I hope you enjoyed this little trip into the past, and if you can think of any others that we missed, feel free to leave a comment below and let us know. As always, thank you so much for watching.